On this video, I would like to talk a little bit about First Kings and speak about the life, the end of the life of David, and what we find going on at that time. And I believe as we look at this chapter in First Kings 1, we're going to be learning about David's last years and his old age, as well as Adonijah, the son of Haggith, who wants to be king and had plotted to take David's place. So reading the first 4 verses, it reads, "Now King David was old and advanced in age, and they covered him with clothes, but he could not keep warm. So his servant said to him, 'Let them seek a young virgin for my lord the king, and let her attend the king and become his nurse. And let her lie in his bosom, in your bosom, that my lord the king may keep warm.' So they searched for a beautiful girl throughout all the territory of Israel and found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. The girl was very beautiful, and she became the king's nurse and served him. But the king did not cohabit with her." As we read this text, it begins by the author setting forth the declining years of David's life, his old age, his failing strength, and providing the occasion for the rise of a successor. The Hebrew actually reads, "Now King David was old and advanced in days," or literally entered into days. Being at the end of his life and his long reign, he might have been possibly about 70 years of age. Having reigned 7 years in Hebron, over Judah, and another 33 years over both Judah and Israel at Jerusalem. So they find a virgin. Some would see an effort here to help the king's virility in the bringing in of this young virgin, and that failure to demonstrate a continual virility would disqualify him as king. An example of one who held that viewpoint was Snaith in Interpreter's Bible, page 20. This, however, is not borne out, I believe, in the text, but she rather seems simply to be one who was called in to minister to the king, in keeping him warm in his old age, and in ministering to him as a nurse. Verse 4 clearly views her as simply ministering to him, and specifically states that the aging king did not have any sexual activity with her, which seems to eliminate any effort of a so-called virility test. According to Josephus, an early historian, such practice was simply a medical prescription. And this is found in his Antiquities 8, verses, or chapter 9, verse 19, verse 3. The one word in the original encompasses the idea then of one who simply serves as a nurse or who attends another. That seems to be what these verses are speaking of. And the lady is from Shunem. Notice she's from Shunem. And just a word about that. She's a Shunammite. Shunem is where the lady was born, and it's a city of Issachar, which lies on a hill slope north of the valley of Jezreel. The Philistines had encamped there in battle with Saul, for example, in 1 Samuel 28:4. And Elisha's hostess was from the same town. We see this in 2 Kings 4:12. The next thing that happens is the conspiracy of Adonijah, beginning at verse 5 through down through verse 10. It reads, Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. So he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen with 50 men to run before him. His father had never crossed him at any time by asking, Why have you done so? And he was also a very handsome man. And he was born after Absalom. He had conferred with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and Abiathar, the priest. And following Adonijah, they helped him. But Zadok the priest, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, Nathan the prophet, Shammai, Rei, and the mighty men who belonged to David were not with Adonijah. So Adonijah is making a bid, conspiring to be the next king. So as we read on then, notice it says that David is failing while Adonijah is conspiring. Due to his rebellious, undisciplined nature, his commanding appearance, and his being the eldest heir to the throne, Adonijah then conspired with Joab and the priests to become the next king. He not only states that he will be king, but even has a solemn feast to herald the occasion. And we are told that Adonijah, furthermore, David's son, was the eldest one alive. Ammon, was the first son, had been killed by Absalom. We see this in 2 Samuel 13, verses 28 and following. Kileab the second, called Daniel in 1 Chronicles 3:1, possibly died in infancy, as nothing is recorded of him. And Absalom the third was killed by Joab's men, 2 Samuel 18:15, leaving Adonijah as the eldest son. With King David sinking in health, Adonijah presumes that since he is the eldest son, he should be the next king. And so he was exalting himself, saying, I will be king, as well as providing a chariot, charioteers, and 50 runners to run before his chariot. And we're told that his father never really disciplined him. Being a very handsome man and everything, it appears that his father had never crossed him or disciplined him. It is interesting, here in this verse, it seems the writer of Deuteronomy seems to give 3 reasons to explain Adonijah's behavior. First of all, he had never been disciplined, literally grieved or made sad by his father. His father had not grieved him all his life, or literally from his days. Second, he was handsome in appearance, which no doubt became a cause of personal pride, as well as that which enabled him to command respect from others. Third, he was born after Absalom, who had been the eldest and was now dead, leaving him as the apparent heir to the throne. So he took General Joab and Abiathar the priest into his confidence, and he plans his strategy to take the kingship. He took two of the most prestigious persons in the kingdom into his confidence. Joab, the son of David's sister, Zeruiah, had been the commander-in-chief of David's militiamen or army on the field, and Abiathar, the priest, was the sole priest to survive Saul's slaughter of the priests at Nob in 1 Samuel 22:20. So as a descendant, he had been with David from the beginning. And now both he and Joab supported Adonijah. But we're told in verse 8 that Zadok, notice verse 8, Zadok the priest, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, Nathan the prophet, and Shammai and Rei, and the mighty men who belonged to David did not support Adonijah. While Joab and Abiathar were on the side of Adonijah, these men were not. Zadok was at first a colleague of Abiathar in 2 Samuel 8:17 and 25:29, but now is a rival of Abiathar. Perhaps jealousy or discord had come between them, resulting in such supporting in each supporting different parties. Benaiah was the commander of the royal bodyguard and had access to soldiers on the spot. He may have felt it time to support the aging Joab as commander-in-chief. A military rivalry is thus in progress. Nathan was the fearless prophet who had rebuked David in 2 Samuel 12. He had a strong influence in the royal court and apparently had complete access to the king. These strong leaders, together with Benaiah's soldiers, outweighed Adonijah's support. Along with these were Shammai and Rei, possibly younger generals, although their records are uncertain. And the mighty men or warriors of David were in opposition to Adonijah. And so we're told then, as the text continues in verse 8, but Zadok the priest then, or in verse 9, Adonijah sacrificed sheep and oxen and fatlings by the stone of Zeholet, which is beside in Rogal, and he invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the men of Judah, the king's servants, but he did not invite Nathan the prophet, Benaiah the mighty man, and Solomon his brother. So notice what Adonijah is now planning, what he is hoping to do. We're told to celebrate his planned proclamation as the next king. Adonijah slaughters sheep and oxen, fatlings, and has a feast in Rugal. The location was a fuller's fountain, or a place where clothes were washed by treading upon them with the feet, and was situated a few hundred yards southeast of Jerusalem, below the junction of the valley of Hinnom with the Kidron Valley. There is a deep well there which strikes a subterranean stream. and drains the valley. The so-called serpent's stone may be a rock mass which would build an altar for the attendant sacrifices. At the accession of a new king, sacrifices were offered to the Lord, as well as the celebration of a feast in which the clan chiefs, administrators, officers, and the populace were entertained. Adonijah arranged such a feast, but had only invited those who were conspiring with him to be the next king. And so we now see the counter reaction of Nathan and Bathsheba. This is in verses 11 to 31. To counteract the plot of Adonijah, Nathan and Bathsheba make their plan to go in before the king. Bathsheba goes in first, followed by Nathan, and both declare to David the action of Adonijah and remind him of his promise to give the throne to Solomon. In obedience to his previous word, David then declares Solomon as king. And this is found in verses 11 to 31. Notice it reads, and then Nathan spoke to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, saying, have you not heard that Adonijah, the son of Haggith, has become king, and David our Lord does not know? So now, come, please, let me give you counsel and save your life and the life of your son Solomon. Go at once to King David and say to him, have you not, my lord, O king, sworn to your maidservant, saying, surely Solomon, your son, shall be king after me, and he shall sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? Behold, while you are still there speaking with the king, then I will come in after you and confirm your words. Nathan speaking with Bathsheba. Notice here Adonijah's quest for the kingdom now is going to be thwarted by Nathan the prophet, who, having announced earlier to David the continual establishment of his kingdom through Solomon in 2 Samuel chapter 7 verse 12. Recognize this as God's clear promise and will. Due to his prophetic office and the personal character, he takes the lead in this plan to obtain David's approval of Solomon. According to the law, in Deuteronomy 17:15, the Lord had reserved for himself the coronation of the king, and he had exercised this right both in the case of Saul and David. He further, according to the record of David's own account of the covenant the Lord had made with him, had chosen Solomon as the next ruler. It is of interest to note at this point that throughout biblical lands, the idea of a divine choice of king was pretty much universal. We see this, for example, in Devo, Ancient Israel, page 100. So knowing God's choice of Solomon and aware of the old king's promise to Solomon in 1 Chronicles 22:26 and following, Nathan saw that no time was to be lost. He and Bathsheba work out this plan and this strategy. She is to remind David of his promise to her that Solomon, her son, is to be the next king, and at the same time inform him of Adonijah's plot. While this promise is nowhere stated to Bathsheba by David, there is reason to believe that is making up that Nathan is not making up a fabrication. It was probably given to her by David after God had sworn that Solomon would reign. While she was sharing this, Nathan would come and confirm her words. Thus Bathsheba then delivers this reminder to David, informs him of what is going on in Enrogel, and hints to him that if Adonijah becomes king, she and Solomon would be in danger of their lives. And so she goes on then to drive home this point to David. And so we're told, so Bathsheba went into the king in the bedroom. Now the king was very old, and Abishag the Shunammite was ministering to the king. Then Bathsheba bowed and prostrated herself before the king, and the king said, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "My lord, you swore to your maid servant by saying, the Lord your God, by saying, surely your son Solomon shall be king after me, and he shall sit on my throne. And now, behold, Adonijah is king. Adonijah, my lord, is going now to be king. You do not know it. He has sacrificed oxen and fatlings and sheep in abundance, and has invited all the sons of the king, and Abiathar the priest, and Joab the commander of the army, but he has not invited Solomon your servant. As to you now, my lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are on you, to tell them who will sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise, it will come about as soon as my lord the king sleeps with his fathers, that it means as soon as he dies, that I and my son Solomon will be considered to be offenders. And so, as we look at these verses, she drives home the point that you vowed to me. We can't find such a vow as recorded in Scripture, but it is likely, as I said, that the queen did receive that word from David concerning Solomon's rule. The king probably made such an oath to the queen mother. And since there was no stated law for succession as yet in Israel, other than divine choice, David then has the right and responsibility to state the successor. And she warns that Solomon and I will then be in trouble if Adonijah becomes king. I and my son Solomon will be sinners. The word is chata'im, meaning political offenders. So Bathsheba does not state the actual consequence of what would happen to Solomon and herself in specific terms. But at in the ancient period, all rivals of a potential person aspiring to be king or to have the throne were often treated very harshly. This was a grim way of preventing divisions and insurrections and so forth. Jehoram, for example, is an illustration of this practice in 2 Kings or 2 Chronicles 21 and verse 4. So as we continue in this, while she was speaking, Nathan then came in, and he came in to confirm and supplement her appeal as planned in chapter 1, verses 22 to 27. He asked the king if he has decreed that Adonijah should reign, as he tells David of his action and what he's trying to do. Shocked that David has not revealed this to him. The point of the prophet's skillful and his really, we could say, not too ingenious appeal lies in the insinuation that, to judge from appearances, David must have been acting behind the backs of his confidential advisors. Nathan cannot believe the king would do such a thing, yet he cannot imagine any other explanation for his conduct. So Nathan then bows before the king. Notice as we continue in the following verses, it says that they told the king, "Here is Nathan the prophet." He came in. Then Nathan said, "My lord the king, have you said Adonijah shall be king after me? For he has gone down today and has sacrificed oxen and fatling." He tells what Adonijah had done. "But me, even me, your servant, and Zadok the priest, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and your servant Solomon, he is not invited. Has he not invited? Has he, having done this by my lord, the king? And you have not shown to your servants who should sit on the throne?" So in other words, what he's really saying is, how can this be that we haven't been informed of this? The text views Adonijah as going down from the city of Jerusalem and to Enrogel, which was in the valley below the city. And he does talk about Zadok and Benaiah. Nathan indicates that before Adonijah's feast, there was a party favoring Solomon as the next king. And for this reason, Adonijah had excluded them. That is, excluded Nathan. And so, again, he's saying what really is happening and so forth. And having heard the words of Nathan, then, David calls Bathsheba back into his presence and renews to her his previous pledge. Bathsheba, in a proper response of gratitude, thanks and expresses her loyalty to the aged monarch. And so that brings us up then to the next movement of chapter 1. That is the preparation of Solomon to be king in verses 33 to 40. So I'm going to stop there and just talk my way through and see how this might work on YouTube. I have no idea. I've done my Hebrew, translated this at one time, and now I'm just talking through sort of a commentary of this book, and maybe it's too much for YouTube. I don't know. But at any rate, I'm going to stop there, and we'll see and pick it up possibly next time. Thank you very much.
Now, see, I would love